Well, good afternoon, Scott Baker and Joe Watson. Glad you're with us today.
Greetings,
Good
greetings,
to see
Mikey.
you.
Great to be here. Scott, great to see
And
you.
I was just pondering, I was getting the feeling of our new, slightly different animation for our stream starting soon, which people that are listening to the podcast later or something, but you might not see any of that. But we're always evolving. We're always evolving. But let me get right to the title. So the field note we're talking about today, field note 1694, is why gratefulness is a predictor of talent. And gratefulness comes up from time to time. And I think that can sometimes be an ooey gooey quicksand of nothingness. In this case, I think there's actually some, there's some insights in here that I think are not only helpful, but like maybe even a little bit surprising. So, but Joe, we're grateful that you're here.
Hey, grateful to be here. Couldn't think of a better place to be right now.
Indeed. So, so first of all, before we get to the gratefulness part, we have it in admired leadership. We have kind of our leadership people, and then we have sort of our strategic communications gurus, and then we have there's like a secret hallway, and then there's a thing where they have these sort of talent people and they don't do talent placement, but they know the secrets of talent, like the indicators of talent. So, like when big companies are trying to get a new CEO or something like that. So in general, when you're talking as a leadership coach, Joe, to other leaders, and they're like, well, we need a new chief technical officer. We need a this kind of person. I know you're familiar with our leadership content and our talent content, but what are the kinds of things that you talk to about leaders in general in terms of assessing the talent indicators?
Yeah, sure. I think the key thing is understanding that we really can get far beyond what I'll call gut feel. Right?
Yeah.
What we've always done, cultural alignment. These things have their place.
Wait, gut feel's not enough? Like just having this feels right.
Finger to the wind, as I like to say, mistakes don't happen, right? You either missed it, right, or you ignored it. It's usually one of the two, right?
Yeah.
So we can have processes and systems up front to allow you to not be in that predicament. Right, talent indicators and understanding talent is part of that, right? And diving into things like we're talking about today. There's nuance in this, and so in our work, we're always working with leaders to identify in a very thoughtful, research-based way. What are the critical elements that we draw from? We've been doing this a long time. I won't tell folks that are watching because they know that, but also how that blends with the environment. That the individuals, executives are hiring and so on. Those cultural elements and our research efforts allow us to pull those things out as well. But you have to blend those, and you have to understand that there's science in this as much as there's art. And that's, the thing, unfortunately, I think people tend to learn later after they bump their head a few times.
Yeah. So, Mikey, what have you learned in all of your many years in terms of how people pick talent? And then we'll get to the gratefulness part.
Well, the main thing that kind of comes to my mind is where the screen is laid out. Because are you going to screen for fit first, or are you going to
right?
And so and that's an important thing that a lot of times people think, well, we screen for both fit and talent. We screen for all of these things, right? But where you gate those has a big implication, and that's something that I didn't kind of think about until I came to the firm here. And just that order of operations is an important thing to think through.
So it's not gut. It's not just fit. And you can also go to you can get way too, people were making fun of, what is it? The Cleveland Browns had their thing with this 240 question personality survey for anybody that wanted to be the head coach. And whereas the Pittsburgh Steelers had a different mechanism. It was like, have you been to Pittsburgh? Okay, you're a candidate, right? That's all it took. I'm exaggerating. So let me just say, you can go to our corporate website, which is actually CRA-Admired Leadership. You can go to the talent section, and there's a really great video. And you know why it's great? Because I'm in it. But it explains the talent indicators. It would be a great help to many of you if you're just thinking in general. But now let's get to this issue of gratefulness, right? So this is the unusual thing, which is that there are two main ones at the top, and then a third one that kind of kicks in here about why gratefulness would be a predictor, like a strong indicator of talent. And I think that they make sense. I don't think anybody would be like, well, that doesn't make sense. But these are all three things that we just don't think about that often. Had you ever thought, until this field note, had either of you ever thought, you know what, I think a great indicator of talent is gratefulness?
No, I haven't thought of that. I have thought about the indicators of gratefulness, though.
Yes,
and
right.
Mostly because I have a couple of non-neurotypical kids
right.
who don't naturally express gratitude. And by the way, me as a parent waiting and saying, don't say that until you mean it. Don't apologize until you're really sorry, right? And oftentimes as parents, that's a good strategy to go through because we want that internal cultivation to be like, you really identify as grateful before you start demonstrating the grateful. But when you have kids that aren't neurotypical that way, sometimes you really focus on the behaviors and be okay with the fact that the behavior is going to lead the way. And then maybe the mindset that you're hoping for is going to come second.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then let me, this may apply in ways that you kind of work with your kids, but let me ask you, put it this way, Joe. I was on a rant a couple of months ago on this topic with Mikey, where I said, I think there might be a difference between gratefulness as a feeling, as a psychological construct, and thanksgiving, like the actual act or behavior of demonstrating gratefulness that is different. Now, am I over emphasizing that there might be a difference between gratefulness and Thanksgiving, or does that make sense?
Well, no, I think it makes sense. And I think there's some of that. To me, though, it's understanding the gratefulness at a deeper level, I think is what we're talking about in the field note, and understanding about talent. And that's not to diminish Thanksgiving, right, in any way.
Yeah.
And not to diminish that, but it's understanding intrinsically how someone is formed and their capacity to basically take that trait and activate it. And I think if you look at it, particularly, when we think about the grateful people in our worlds, right? These are people that it shouldn't surprise you. For example, one I love is their ability to receive feedback. Grateful people are much better with feedback, much better with hearing negative commentary, right? And why is that? It's because that oftentimes the disconnect in feedback comes from the presumption of intent. And when you leave people to their own devices about the presumption of intent, they tend oftentimes to skew towards assuming malintent. But when your posture is one of gratefulness, then you are looking at the words that come to you, and your lens is affixed in such a way that you are not necessarily predisposed or predisposed to assuming negativity in that, right? Which creates receptivity. That's a fundamental difference to me.
Let me ask you, when we talk about coachability, we want our kids to be coachable because it's like one of these highest praises that you would get from a coach. Your kid is so coachable. I love coaching your kid because of the way that they listen. If I think like a great majority of coachability is exactly what you described, Joe. It's gratitude. What else might it be if it's not just gratitude, right? Because your ability to listen comes from gratitude, right? Like no matter how else you end up describing coachability, I think all of it can kind of stem back to gratitude, right?
Well, yeah, no question. And I think what's so interesting about that, Mikey, is when you think about coachability, right? You think about it's a relationship between two parties, okay? And we're operating in a world where time is scarce, where everyone is pressed. Where we're thinking about how we invest the most precious resource, which is time. There is no greater reflection that a person who has shared coaching, who has shared input feedback, can have reflected back to them than the understanding that information has been taken, internalized, and put into action.
Right.
Like there is nothing better, right? Because it is a fundamental validation of the investment of the most precious resource that they have into another individual. Right. And sitting and operating from a position of gratitude to arrive at that point is the essential element. And people, when you feel that, when you feel that someone who truly has been coachable, that someone truly has accepted that information and put it into practice, what does it make any human want to do? Help more, right?
Help more.
provide more opportunity, provide more mentoring, right? Because they understand there is an elasticity to the fiber of the makeup of that individual that will allow them to take on more information, more direction, right? More pathways that will allow them to build greater muscle to contribute to the organization in its direction. I mean, that it's a powerful set of connectivity when leaders put that together, even if they aren't able to articulate it as clearly as we did in today's field note.
For sure, yeah. Well, let me actually give the line from the field note that that is pointed to in the beginning, which is the people who feel and express gratitude tend to, and these are the key phrases, reflect on experiences more accurately. Very interesting. And then extract the lessons from those outcomes, right? So that's part of this. And then that part that you were just pointing to, it comes in later in the field note, Joe, about like, well, if you actually have this attitude with the people who are your mentors and coaches, they're more likely to spend the time with you. They're going to invest in you. And so if you find somebody who just generally has this sort of way of looking at the world, you're like, I bet this person's mentors have spent a lot of time with them, but not with this other person who's a little bit abrasive, right? Because it's just like, we don't want to hang around with those people. But this ability to say that a mindset, and I would kind of tie it with maybe a gratefulness and a curiosity, right? That there's an element of, do I assume that other people know something that I don't know? So that in feedback or in coaching, I'm going to be really attentive, think about it, reflect on what I've been doing, draw that out. That seems to be like a little magic combination.
Yeah, no question. And the trust element that wraps all that up, right, Scott? That exists in all of that, right? Because when you bring that in and you have the trust that's part of that, what you're doing is you're setting, really creating the highway for that exchange. I mean, I think to me, that's the key, right? You're creating that for the exchange. And to your point, folks are hungry for more coming out of it. And they always want more, right? And the curiosity and the willingness. And the other element is the self-awareness, right? That willingness, because I have trust, because I have that level of engagement, because I have that level of belief, I am now willing to be more reflective internally, right? More self-aware, more willing to look back and ponder, what was my role? What did I do? What could I do better? What is my gap? What am I missing, right? And now I have the relationship in place where I'm able to step forward because I'm grateful for it and ask for help, ask for assistance, ask for guidance, right? Fill the gap. I mean, just think about that as a power multiplier. By the way, especially in the world that we live in today, a world driven by pace, a world driven by change. The only, there's that old constant expression, right? The only constant is change. Well, we might as well change that now to the only constant is acceleration, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right,
that's the only constant in our places. And so people who are able to take this skill and display a level of nimbleness, of engagement from a talent perspective intellectually, those are ones that are going to be better able to navigate this pace of acceleration that is upon us all.
Okay, I got a quick question then before we reach our time, because let's get super practical about this. How is it that we assess gratitude then in the middle of a hiring conversation? Like, do you have some really practical ways where we can, I don't know if there's an assessment tool out there specifically focused on gratitude, but maybe there's a magic question or two that we can come up with.
Well,
I think go for it, Joe.
No, you go.
No, my gut is to go to lineage, is to kind of say, tell me about your mentors, tell me about the people that have shaped you, tell me about where was the moment, and I would just ask those things. On an athletic field and whatever in a classroom, was there a teacher that made a big difference? And I'd start listening very carefully to how they talk about that person.
Yeah, Scott hits it right on the nose. It's about the listening, Mikey. I mean, it really is. We have to be intentional about our efforts here. And people are constantly leaving us the breadcrumbs of the journey, the breadcrumbs of what made them who they are now. They're constantly being deposited all around in our conversations and our interactions. And the question is, are we taking the time to recognize them, to pick them up, to look at them, to wonder, right? Because we get the fact that this is a critical component. And I think that's the key, is elevating it to understand that elevating it above the squishiness, Scott, that you referenced before, to something core and foundational and game changing for the times we're in is, the most significant outcome that many listening and reading this can take from this. There's no question.
And I don't know. Mikey, I don't know if I can go 30 seconds longer. If you've even thought about it since our last conversation, if it stuck with you at all, or if I've just been chewing on this in the wrong way. But one of the reasons that I brought up this idea of our earlier rant about the difference between gratefulness and Thanksgiving was I read this quote from David McCullough, the writer, the historian, who said that when you don't know history, he described that as ungratefulness. So when you think, well, what's the opposite of that? Well, that means that when you learn from history, that you're actually attuned to it, attentive to it, you kind of work within the stream of the implications of that. And that's why I was saying there's a lineage here, right? So that if somebody comes and just says, I'm just grateful to the universe, that doesn't mean a whole lot to me. If they say, I had these mentors, or I was in this school, or I went through I'm a chef today because I went through this process, and I am faithful to that process. I can point to the ancestors, to the visionaries, to the people that shaped and formed me. Then I have a much better sense that your loyalty is more than to just the idea that happened to come into your head today. So can you be that kind of person? Because if you're that kind of person, you don't even have to use the word gratefulness. You don't even have to feel grateful, but you're being loyal to that lineage, and that is gratefulness.
There we go.
Yeah, I love it. There's a huge overlap now because of that explanation between gratitude and curiosity. That is kind of unexpected for me, especially when we're going to ask the question, okay, I'm recognizing that I might have the reputation in the office of not being not having a lot of gratitude, right? So it is going to have some implications for me. So what are the things that I can work on? It sounds like one of the first things we would do is like, be more genuinely curious, right?
And if somebody invests in you, like if Joe comes over to me, which he often does at meetings, and says, have you thought about this? Are you thinking about this? And if I come back to him at the next meeting and I say, Joe, I kept thinking about what you told me. Here's what I did.
There we go.
Yeah.
Right? When I come back and I say, here's how you influenced me with what you said, rather than me saying, thank you, it's like, I took action around the thing that you advised me around. What demonstrates gratefulness or Thanksgiving more than that?
Right.
That's an admired leadership thing.
There it is. You took the time to share with them. They took the time to activate against what you shared. Everybody committed the most precious resource on the planet, time.
Right.
That was all worth the extra 2 minutes, Mikey.
Okay. Love it. Thank you both. We'll see you later.
Thank you, Mikey. Great to see you.
Bye now.